Good evening, Merry Christmas, season's greetings, and happy holidays to everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, December 27th, 2023, the last webinar of the year, and I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an online webinar evening of solutions for New Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. APP's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect the prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and sovereignty by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship with Canada. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do this without your help. If you can, please share this webinar, share all our webinars. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Rumble, as well as after this live, we also put them on audio sites such as Apple, Spotify, and video sites like Vimeo as well. These webinars do take time and effort, and we're starting with sponsorship on our webinars. If you'd like to sponsor an upcoming webinar, you can get a hold of us at, I'll just put this up over here, at contact@albertaprosperity.com, which is also on our website. Because we're actually on Christmas holiday break. I shouldn't even be on here, but yet here I am. We're on holiday break for 3 weeks. We did a webinar last week with Michael Wagner with the history of independence in Alberta. Today we've got one I'm really looking forward to watching again with MartyUpNorth, and can Alberta afford to stay in Canada much longer? It was interesting watching last week's and seeing exactly what had changed over the last year. There was, if you remember this last year, that we had a provincial election. We kind of know what happened with that. We had UCP AGM. There was talk about a pension plan, talk about policing. Of course, the Coots 4 guys are still in jail, as they are right now. They missed Christmas again. So a lot of stuff that we were hoping would have taken place, or at least changed when we were making these videos. The one last week was done in April. This one was actually also done in April as well. And if you're keeping tabs, the one next week is about the Alberta pension plan with Tanner Naday. So that's another really good one. We had over 40 episodes to do this year, and I tried to whittle them down to about the top 10 list. Very difficult to do, but they are all amazing. And if you'd like to know what my other top 10 lists are, you can do that by becoming an APP member. And you can go and become an APP member on the website under, I'll just get rid of that there, under albertaprosperityproject.com. And you can find out more about what we're doing. You can even find out about some of the latest events that we've got going on coming in the new year. We're going to be doing what we're calling the Alberta Pension Plan Tour, in which we'll be actually talking about the pension plan as it is proposed, and get people involved, and basically compare the CPP, the APP, Alberta Pension Plan. It's difficult when you have APP as Alberta Prosperity Project as well as the Alberta Pension Plan. But we're going to be talking about that. So I would advise anybody to go, and you can always go and just take a look at the events page on the website. The other thing I want to bring attention to is, of course, I don't think it's on here officially, but we also are sponsoring Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson is coming to Calgary. He's also coming to Edmonton. And I'm just going to throw up a couple of quick things here on the little ticker there. Actually, I'm going to put this in the chat. People are interested in getting tickets. If people are interested in getting tickets, they're $175 for the Alberta Pension, even I'm doing it. The Alberta Prosperity Project tickets, locations. And of course, now it's going to tell me that I have to refresh my page here. But I wanted to also show you where the Alberta Prosperity Project tickets are. They are in sections 104 and 118. And if you zoom in, I believe they are rows 5 to 10. So somewhere in there for this side, and somewhere in there for this side. You can see the tickets that have actually gone already. The blue ones are the ones that are available. So if you click on one of those, it'll tell you how much they are, what seats they are, etc., etc. And I also wanted to point out, these ones are the ones that are done through Alberta Prosperity Project. We also have ones that we're selling through the Whistle Stop. If you go to the Whistle Stop page, and I'm also going to throw that back up on the banner here too. These ones are quite a bit more expensive, actually. They're actually, just go to Whistle Stop, whistlestoptruckstop.ca, and these ones are the $500 tickets. Just scroll down to the page there, find Tucker, click on him, and then you will get a rough idea of where these seats are. This is the stage, and these are the rows right here. So you do get a lot closer. Maybe you'll even be able to see him speaking moistly to you. Wrong guy, I know, but it was one of those things that we were talking about, how close you'll be. You'll actually be able to see that. So that's where the $500 tickets are, and you can get to them at truckstop.ca. And what else have we got to talk about here? The last thing we always want to talk about is you can also register for the petition to force a referendum on Alberta's independence, and you can do that by going to bit.ly/AB vote yes. And we're well on our way to 600,000. Yeah, things we're 15,000 is the next goal that we're attaining, and we should be able to do that this week. We need people out there. We need voices out there. If you believe in what we're doing, please tell your neighbors, tell your friends. I hope everyone had a conversation at the dinner table. I began to have a conversation, and anyways, at least the seed is planted. And you know what? That's all it takes, is just to be able to do that. So, and with that, I'm going to jump right into the webinar itself. Is actually entitled, Can Alberta Afford to Stay in Canada Much Longer? And we have our guest. He's a political commentator and Alberta independence advocate. It is MartyUpNorth. And I'll show you some of his web stuff as we're talking to him too. This is a live webinar, so we encourage you to ask questions and make comments throughout this presentation. Just put 3 question marks before your question so it's flagged and we can quickly view the questions, especially near the end when we've got tons and tons of comments. We can always go back and take a quick look. And with that, I'm going to bring Marty on, and we can find out a little bit more about him. Hello, Marty.
Kerry, how's it going, man?
Good, very good.
I've never been called a political commentator. If my wife heard that, she would say, no, he's a know-it-all. And then when she says that, I'm like, no, I'm just curious. I'm very curious.
On your YouTube, it actually says you're a 55-year-old outdoorsman from Alberta. So there you go. So that
yeah,
you are a man of many talents.
Thanks. I kind of think so. I mean, I do have. I'm an engineer by training, so it makes me curious to start with. So I'm a very curious person, which is why I enjoy what I do on Twitter and on social media, because it's exactly what we're doing right now, which is immediate engagement. You get to talk to people and you get immediate feedback, and I absolutely love that.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why you're brought on, I mean, I'm going to quickly read your bio here just because it is interesting. Marty was born and raised in Ontario and studied engineering at the University of Ottawa, so he could connect with his Franco-Ontario roots. So you are Francophone, and you were born and raised in Ontario. Where were you born and raised?
I was actually I was born in Ottawa, in a district, and I was born in Gloucester at the Hôpital Montfort.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good, excellent. And he graduated at the height of the recession in 1990, so he moved halfway across the country to northern Alberta to start an unplanned career in the oil patch, as many people do, I guess. He's married and has 4 adult children, 3 of which are following in his footsteps as engineers, semi-retired now, and enjoy pursuing his lifelong passion of backpacking in the Rockies. And he currently lives in the country northwest of Calgary. Excellent. Now, this is something that I thought was really interesting. Marty has lived in 5 provinces and worked in all 10 throughout his 33-year career. The reason I say that is because I've actually had conversations with many people in Alberta Prosperity Project and even just casual conversations. And it seems like almost everybody in Canada has lived in 2 provinces. I would say on average, people will go to school or grow up in one place, and then they leave and go and do something else. You've lived in 5 provinces.
Yeah. I was born in Ontario. Quickly moved to the province of Quebec, and so I as a youngster, I was on the south shore of Montreal.
Okay.
I should go back. So my father is Franco-Ontarian, and my mother is a Quebecer. And mom wanted to be an airline stewardess, moved to Ontario to learn English to advance her career. Poor mom, I always say, once she had kids, the career was done. So as a youngster, it was back and forth between living in Quebec and Ontario because of dad's work.
Okay.
And I went to the University of Ottawa because it's a bilingual school, got me back to my roots. And then I was a co-op student. And then I had the opportunity. So naively, or not naively, but growing up in Ontario, I thought I'm either going to end up in automotive or pulp and paper. Yeah. But as a co-op student, I get these job postings, and there's these jobs in Alberta, and nobody's applying for them. I'm like, what? You're telling me you're going to fly me to Alberta and let me go? So I accepted a job in Alberta. In northern Alberta, I don't know if my first job in northern Alberta was in Slave Lake. Yeah. And I remember my father had traveled the country extensively, and dad said, if you go to Alberta, we'll never see you again. And he was basically correct.
That is, you're right. Yeah.
Because, and I tell people, I found very like-minded people in Alberta. Yeah. So it grew on me, but it didn't have to grow on me a lot because I found very like-minded people in Alberta. Yeah. And then so I lived in Alberta, I lived in Saskatchewan as well, and I lived in British Columbia. Yeah. So I've lived in those 5 provinces, but work-wise, I've worked oil and gas. So my career is oil and gas. Yeah. And because of oil and gas, I've worked in every province, and I've also had to go to almost every province for one reason or another. So
yeah, and same with me. I mean, I've worked in pretty much. I grew up in Winnipeg and lived there until '96. Moved out here. Haven't looked back since being in Alberta. But even with that, I've been working in BC, although Saskatchewan, Manitoba. Did work in Ontario. I worked with Canadian military contractors, so I was doing stuff in Ottawa. Of course, we had this conversation before we went on about one of the little restaurants we used to go to, Fathers and Sons. Yeah, everybody knows that in Ottawa. And then even with my jukebox and stuff that I do now, our head office was or still is in Montreal. So, and with that, I went right up until New Brunswick. So I have not officially worked in Nova Scotia or Newfoundland or PI, but it is interesting when you're having these conversations. I think people that are a little more adept to living or being and seeing how big our country is and how people are just different everywhere. Right, they all have their own little way of doing things. They even speak differently. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, let me say one quick thing. So, I graduated in 1990, and I came to Alberta. And so I graduated. When I was a university student, it was through the Meech Lake Accord era and the Charlottetown Accord and things like that. And I have French roots. Then I come to Alberta, and I remember naively in the early days when I was in Alberta, I had a Franco-Ontarian French accent, and people would bug me a little bit. And I would actually kind of defend the Quebecers, because fresh in my mind in those days was the fact that, Quebec had challenged the Constitution and that claimed to be a distinct society. And I would defend Quebec as a distinct society. Now, 35 years later into my career, I realized that Canada has, I'd say, at least 10 distinct societies. I mean, if you go to Newfoundland, you hang out with Newfies. You are hanging out with a group that is as different as a group from Saskatchewan and as different as a group from the west coast of BC and Calgary.
I agree.
And so it is, there's the for either based on geography, based on historical culture, based on industry that they work in, and all sorts of things. We live in a humongous country with very distinct regions, geographically, politically, sociologically, and culturally.
And those regions in Canada are, you could argue the same thing, if you're living in the States and you're in New England versus going to California and Oregon. But what I find in the States is everyone down there identifies themselves as American.
Right.
And in Canada, of course, you would say, of course, I'm from Canada, but yet there's always a but, right? They're going to say something about, well, I'm from Newfoundland and this is what we do.
Well, and I think part of that comes from it was deliberate by our governments. The Canadian governments want it to be. I mean, it's scary to be Canada next to this big giant bear, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted to protect our culture and we wanted to protect some of our lifestyles and things like that. So we had governments that I think purposely tried to make Canadians distinct from Americans, but they went further and they did something. When I was growing up, we were told that we were a cultural mosaic, whereas the Americans are told they're a melting pot.
That's right.
So it persists to this day, and it makes it does what you're saying. It makes us different. Yeah. I love Americans, by the way, and I mean the patriotism of the Americans. When I call them our cousins, but when you go to the U.S. and you go to watch something like the Daytona 500 or the Super Bowl somewhere, their local patriotism. Now, don't get me started when they're on the road, when you're at the Olympics in France or in London and there's an American delegation and a Canadian one, then I can't stand the American patriotism in that context. But
I'm just going to continue reading this before we get too far off topic here. It says, you've lived in 5 provinces and worked in 10 throughout his 33-year career. His informed opinion is that Canada is a failed experiment as a confederation, and the only way forward is for independent provinces. He considers himself Albertan and wants an independent Alberta. Marty is a conservative-minded individual who believes in self-reliance, small government, charity, family, property ownership, and more. You're a professional engineer and driven by a practical mindset instead of an ideological one. And Marty is a large online supporter base, or has an large online supporter base, and you've also been credited by by being the creator of the hashtag Trudeau must go.
I didn't create the hashtag itself, but I revived the hashtag but we're not here to talk about that.
No, I know. One of the things that we were talking about was when we went to Ottawa, and we had a little bit of a tagline that hashtag Trudeau's a dink, but that's a different thing altogether. Yeah. We definitely want to talk about, of course, the topic being today is, I have to go back and actually say it again. Can Alberta afford to stay in Canada much longer? And basically it's about is Canada just a failed country or like, discuss. Well, no, let's talk. I mean, yes, my answer to that is no. Yes. Yeah. Deep down, I'm very typical of a lot of Albertans. I mean, in fact, up until about 2015, I was not a political guy. Yeah. I come to Alberta, I just want to work. Yeah. I don't need a lot of help from other people. I mean, at my core, in my bio, it definitely says Marty is a libertarian, which kind of means leave me alone. Okay. Yeah. Leave me alone. I tend to be self-reliant. I personally live on an acreage. My favorite hobby is actually going out in the wilderness for days on end. Yeah. I've been doing it since the days before satellite communications, and I'll be I do it because I enjoy it and being self-sufficient. Yeah. And that mindset was fine. And there was some interference by the rest of Canada for the first 25 years of my adult life, but not enough to worry about it. You're a typical Albertan. You work head down, you pay extra taxes. They go to Ottawa and they're wasted, but you say, you know what? I'm a lucky Albertan. Yeah. And then there's a downturn in the economy, and it's just another downturn. As an Albertan, we've had downturns. So we're just going to weather this downturn. And this is the one that starts in 2014 and 15. But we're going to weather it. But you know what? We've been paying taxes to Ottawa for all these years, and we've got all this other stuff. So let's ask for a little bit of help. Yeah. And the help doesn't come. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's how you're going to be. Okay, that's fine. Then a couple of years go by, and not only is the help not coming from Ottawa, but now they're actually
interfering, and they're actually battling me. I'll say me, because I don't want to speak for all Albertans, but as an Albertan myself who enjoys who works in the oil patch, who enjoys hunting, who has a firearm, who wants to travel, I have a government that's interfering, that's not even helping, but it's actually interfering. So so then you start to really wonder about so then it comes to light. I mean, because back to my fundamental roots, I want to be left alone, and part of being left alone is small governments. And okay, I'm paying money to a government in Ottawa, and I barely know why. As an Albertan, what am I getting from Ottawa? And now, so now it's come to a boil. And I mean, I'll pause or I can keep talking, because it's a topic that explodes in so many ways,
Well, it totally does. And of course, anybody that's been watching us with APP, and at least for the last, it's been a year, and well, technically, I guess it's almost been 2 years. But really since the convoy, when things really started as the Alberta Prosperity Project. And people have if anybody's been watching this, we're all kind of we feel this boiling going on, right? We're all upset with things that we think that we have no way of getting out of. We have this equalization that we just have to go through, and we have to pay our taxes there. We have to deal with the RCMP. We have our own police force. Well, no, that's a little too difficult. But you know what? There's no reason why we can't do this stuff. It just really takes a lot of people and some willpower, and getting together and saying these are our priorities. Do we need to do something in with healthcare? Do we need to do something with our own police force? Do we want to do our own taxing and deal with that? And of course, that's the whole idea behind the Alberta Prosperity Project, is we want to see whether or not we can get some leverage to deal with the federal government and say, look, we're going to take care of this stuff. You guys deal with, the stuff that a federal government should. You deal with immigration. You deal with talking to other countries and dealing with that. We're doing our own stuff. We're dealing with our own resources, et cetera, et cetera.
But just on that point, right? I mean, it's a question I start to ask myself more and more. Well, not more and more. I've been asking myself this question for a decade. I mean, what does the federal government do? Why in Canada do we have 3 levels of government? A federal government, a provincial government, and a municipal government. And in some cases, it gets even worse, because you got a municipal government, and I swear to God, there's like this sub government underneath there. So, okay, bring it back somewhere, because we're all over the place.
Well, and I you know what? That's the thing about these webinars. It's we have a topic, but we don't really have a script. And by all means, we can go wherever we want to talk about. And people are asking questions, and they're all over the map already, just because we really have not gone down one particular path. So, but what thing I want to talk most about tonight is we were talking about is Canada, or is Alberta ready to just say, what, we've tried Canada, we've been here since 1905, since the 70s, and with Trudeau and the National Energy Program, and we're kind of getting screwed on what we can do with our resources, etc. I think it's time to just say, forget it, let's walk away. And again, growing up in Manitoba, I had always thought of Manitoba westward as being its own little country, right? You could even argue that maybe into Ontario, that Lake of the Woods and all that was very much Manitoba minded. But as you got closer to Southern Ontario, it was a different mindset. It was, upper, lower Canada, that sort of thing, and central Canada. But it always seemed to be that, maybe it should be split in two. And I understand that you actually even think that the provinces should each be their own country. Is that a fair statement to say?
Yeah, I mean, when let's step back a little bit,
Yeah.
so Canada's formed, around 1867 out
Yeah.
east. It's four provinces get together, and
Yeah.
then over time, for economic reasons, they got this other province on the other coast. They got Alberta, BC,
Yeah.
and then Confederation was really formed to put a corridor between the east and the west, and put the railroad and the Trans-Canada Highway eventually, and things like that.
Yeah.
And Alberta joins in whatever 1905. And to make that work, these people sit down and they come up with this really weird formula, right? There's we're going to try and make this big country work together. It's like, okay, well then let's just have one government somewhere and make the whole country work. But somehow or other, they're like, no, there's a resistance. So now you got this weird formula of, we're going to have a government in Ottawa that has some responsibilities, and we're going to have all these other governments in all these provinces that have these other responsibilities.
That's right.
So just the way it was separated in terms of responsibilities is bizarre. Plus, it was done in a constraint of a dominion and of commonwealth and a monarchy and all sorts of things. So I mean, if I had to redo the country, I wouldn't do it the way it was done. But let's forget about that. So it works, but does it really work? So then, for the next 100 years, does it work? My theory is that no, it didn't work, but most of us didn't know about it because the internet didn't exist, communications weren't there. So as poor Albertans, we've gotten a bum rap for 100 years. We just didn't know it.
Yeah.
And so then in the last 20 or 30 years, we finally realized that we're getting a bum rap. And then you get all these people that say, well, we can make Confederation work. It's like, no, you can't. It's failed. It's not failed. It got off to a bad start. It was poorly thought of to start with, and now we're trying to make it work. And some people are disingenuous. They're not trying to make it work. They're making it worse or they're using the bad parts to their advantage and not trying to make it work. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, you and I wake up or sit at our television on election night at 6 p.m. when the polls, 8 p.m. when the polls close here, and we go, 8:05, election is declared, because a small group that lives under this fictitious red line in Greater Toronto and Montreal gets to make up the rules for all of us. Why? Because of a remnant of something called the British Commonwealth Act. Yeah. So the whole thing is completely broken. Yeah. People aren't willing to fix it. And so some people should accept to fix it, but if they don't accept to fix it, one way I can convince people to fix it is simply by the fact that you're losing a ton of money. Just as an Albertan, you're losing $10 billion a year going to Ottawa for nothing. Yeah. And so, I'll be very practical here. Just before the show, I went and pulled up my old tax return from a couple of years ago, because the one before COVID is more representative, right? Yeah, that's true. And in that year, I paid $54,000 in taxes. 38 went to Ottawa, 16 went to Alberta, and then 6 went municipally. Yeah. If I rack my brain as to what I got from Ottawa, I have no idea.
No, and there's nothing.
Border security. Wow, man, that's a sieve. Yeah. Airport traffic control, barely. They decide which frequencies we use for radio. They control. They inspect foods. They control the navigable waterways, and they provide a military and some courts. I mean, so when we talk about the topic, can we afford it? I'm using dollars as a starting point, because if I just say it's broken, people go, okay, show me why it needs to be fixed. So when you put a dollar value to how broken it is, then, do you replace your old car, or do you buy a new one, or do you throw it in the garbage and do something different? I don't know. So and I'm trying to look at the comments here, but
you're probably much like me too. Like, you're a proud Canadian, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Do you wear a Canadian hockey jersey whenever the Olympics are on?
Oh, I cheered I cheered Canada at the World Cup. What a great!
I know, absolutely. So it's not about that. I think it's we love Canadians. We love the country itself. We just don't like what the government is doing. So, and I've had this conversation with many people, and they say, well, you know what? Then all you need to do is just wait till the next government comes along.
Which is a very valid point. I mean, I'll even say it, so in the back of my mind, yes, it's been broken for years, but we did have some politicians that were good at faking it or keeping it going without us really noticing. I think of Jean Chrétien as an example. I mean, quite honestly, I prospered well in that era, even as an Albertan under a Liberal government.
Yeah.
But now, what's the fiasco that's happened in Ottawa in the last 7 years, and COVID and the courts and everything else, has got me nervous to the point where, again, I realized that it was broken. It was just well disguised that it was broken because we had some good politician. But now I think too many people are taking advantage of the flaws to protect themselves, to enrich themselves. Yeah. And so I don't trust future politicians on this. In fact, I think my comment is valid by the fact that you had a Chrétien and others who did acknowledge that there were problems with the Constitution, who tried to fix it, and then it went away. So then there's a new generation, or future generations are too willing to say it's broken. They tried to fix it. It's unfixable. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to profit. Yeah. So I'm too scared of Ottawa's powers right now. Yeah. And so back to your premise, yes, I think every province should go on their own, but if they don't, I'm perfectly happy if Alberta goes on its own or finds some form of independence. Yeah. And I do value the steps, the intermediate steps, similar to what Quebec has done. I work in Quebec. Quebec has its own. I mean, you go to work in Quebec, man, you got to register with the Revenu Québec and get your tax number there. Yeah. And they collect their own. They have their own QPP and their own systems, and I think that's valid. Yeah. In fact, Quebec's a great ally. It's weird if there's an alliance in the next 20 years of Quebec and Alberta, that'd be, I wouldn't have seen that one coming.
No, that's true too. Yeah. And it's so, that's a brilliant observation, because they really have done what we should be doing, right? Do our own tax collection, do our own policing like Ontario, and at least get those steps through. And then that way there's less Ottawa, more Alberta.
Yeah. It's called the firewall. I mean, that's the term that people are using, the firewall, It's the same reason that I try to organize my finances so that I owe Ottawa money instead of expecting a return from them. Because if I owe them money, I got a firewall. If they owe me money, there's no firewall. So, if Alberta collected its own taxes first and then send it to Alberta or to Canada, perfect. Yeah. But I don't like the way we do it.
And even dealing with banking stuff, like it is, a lot of people don't realize this, but when money goes into your bank and they do that 3-day hold on it and all that other, whatever they call it, they're making money on your money, right? And it would be the same thing. Like when we send stuff out to Ottawa and in terms of our income tax, then we wait for our return to come back to Alberta. We send $60 billion there and we get $27 billion back. Right, so I think we're net. We lose 33 or.
Oh, they do that. They do that on our pension money, which they're holding for us. They do it on all sorts of things. I mean, and that's I can't tell you how many people have you ever met who are excited about getting a tax return during tax season. It's like you're getting your money back.
Absolutely.
Plus without interest. So no, absolutely.
No, and especially if they're going through the whole civil servant strike right now, I don't know how fast anybody's going to get any sort of return, right? And you could basically argue the same thing, that if we had our own tax collection, we could probably end up running into the same issue.
The beauty of the strike right now is, unlike a lot of other strikes in the past, there seems to be no disruption, which is really going to go against them. It's going to prove that your job is not 100% necessary.
No, I don't notice the 150 million or 150,000. There's more than that. I forget what the number is, but how many people are actually off work right now? I don't notice anything.
Yeah.
And likewise, maybe we won't for the next month or two, depending on how fast it actually happens. Right. There are certain things that they would be dealing with, maybe in terms of taxing and maybe, some of that.
It's more than the CRA, right? It's groups if you've applied for a passport or your gun license, you probably, your gun license will go from 9 months to 10. Woohoo.
That's right. Yeah. So that's a good thing, because, we've actually, we've been meaning to have a conversation about hunting and gun licenses and all that, and it just so happens that that's one of the things that you do. Do you have any comments on what the government is trying to do with the gun ban and especially
it's one of the things that has me the most upset right now of all
yeah.
the interference that the government has done in my life. The fact that, you know, just on the surface, the whole idea of coming after me, as an example. I've had a gun permit since 1990, and I've used my rifles to hunt, and I have a couple of handguns, and for whatever reason, I've never broken a law. But now I'm being told that they want to confiscate my property. So I'm upset about that, but I'm also upset about just the nasty precedent that sets, because we live in a country that is, you know, we have common law, which is precedent based. So if the government can come after me for my guns because they decide that that's the case, that's fine. But then they can come after somebody else for their car that's got more than 150 horsepower. They can come after somebody else because they have a jet ski. They can come after somebody else because they've gone on 2 trips instead of just 1. They can make you reduce your house. They can do all sorts of things.
Notice how that stretches and gets bigger and wider, the field of view on that, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, you have an internal combustion engine. Well, at first we'll say it's not we'll make up a definition. It's too big. Your truck is too big. Why do you need a 150 horsepower engine? We'll limit it to 100.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we'll go from there. So that's that. You know, the gun. So a couple of things. I mean, I don't mind talking about the gun law, because
please.
If first of all, let's go back. So governments should be passing. So I'm an engineer. So as an engineer, I've been asked all my life to solve problems. And one of the things I've learned when I'm solving problems is, first of all, you know, ask a couple of. If somebody says, "Hey, Marty, you know, this car keeps having flats. We need to find a better tire." My first instinct is no longer to start changing the tire. My first instinct is to go, hang on a second. Is it the tire? Is it the way you're driving the car? Is it the road you're driving on? What is it? Let's make sure we're solving the right problem. And then in order to solve the problem, I collect a bit of information. And then I'll come up with a solution. In the case of the gun grab, I'm like, what problem are you trying to solve? And when they say it's gun crime, I go, okay, gun crime. Then I look into it and I go, whoa. You got the RCMP puts out a report every year on gun crimes. Beautiful report. You know, put a link to it, share it with people. The 2022 is about to come out. And in there, they'll show you the stats. So then you go, wow, the gun crime is in Toronto and is in Montreal and in places like that. So whatever. So once you establish where the problem is, then you should come up with a solution. Well, in the case of the gun grab, I would say they're actually going after the wrong problem, and they're implementing a bad solution to the wrong problem. So, you know, taking away firearms from law-abiding citizen is complicated, unenforceable. And they'll give examples. They say it was done in Australia. It's like, no, it wasn't. Australia's had 70% of the guns that used to be in private hands are still in private hands. Australians haven't turned them in. So it's poorly done. It's going after the wrong problem, targeting the wrong people. And then it sets a nasty precedent. So it's like, holy smokes, man, what's good about this? There's nothing good. And so I don't like it for those fundamental reasons. But then I also don't like it because I feel targeted, bad word, but I feel singled out as a law-abiding firearm owner. You know, now I want to go back to one of these other weird things. No, let's keep going.
I'm actually, I was just going to send Walter a message, and I'll just say it out loud and maybe he can find it. So today there was an announcement about instead of going after the people who have guns, the government is actually going after the retail stores to confiscate their guns. Do you know anything about that? That's just an evolution. So right now the government has gone after everybody's guns. So whether you're a store or a private citizen. So me personally right now, I'll say it out loud. I have 2 firearms that are banned. So they're sitting in my basement in a lock, and I'm not allowed to take them to the gun range. I can't sell them. I can't take them anywhere. I can't do anything with them. They have to sit there. So I don't know and I'm waiting because they've been in that state since 2020. And the government keeps saying, we'll come up with the rules.
Now, in my case, let's say that's $2,000 sitting in my basement that I can't use or do anything. If you're a store owner, if you're Cabela's and you had 1,000 of those firearms that have been sitting in your locker, that's $1 million of inventory that you can't do anything. So what today the government did is they simply said of the 11,000 banned firearms currently in the hands of stores, we'll buy those back. They haven't said what they're going to do with the 1.2 million others. So 1.2 million. So we're talking about confiscating ballpark $1.2 billion worth of property from Canadians. I can think of a lot of things we could do with that. I mean, but that's what the rule was today. And it's only announced that they have an agreement with the sort of Firearms Retail Association. They haven't agreed on a price. They haven't agreed on anything. Yeah. So, that was Mendocino, one of the worst ministers.
Every time I see him up on the screen, I cringe. As well as Trudeau. Yeah. I'm just going to go back and look through some of these. There's the. Let's see if I can at least call this one up. That we were just talking about, the buyback program.
Somebody wants to take my firearms off my hands.
Yeah,
I'm actually going to Edmonton tomorrow, and I'm picking up 5 firearms from somebody else. So people are nervously transferring them, doing things that they can.
Yeah. So that's basically what it was about today. Yeah. So a little late to show it up on screen, but I wanted to do that anyway. So, and again, because we do these webinars every Wednesday, and we also post them. And they are on, they're on Rumble, they're on LinkedIn, they're on BitChute, they're Facebook.
Actually, Kerry, just as an example, though, the gun rule, geez, we almost glanced over it. Yeah. It is an example. So, one of the steps along Alberta independence is that firewall. And, so commonly in the firewall, we talk about Alberta collecting its own taxes, its own police force. Yeah. Alberta selected or opted to have its own chief firearms officer a couple of years ago. So that's right. They were always federal, but we said no. We'll pay the guy or the gal, and it's a gal. But then this week we also passed our own Firearms Act. Now it has a bit of teeth, which says that if Ottawa wants to confiscate firearms from Albertans, they can't do it with the RCMP. Somebody in Alberta will have to go and get trained as a firearms collection agent. And Danielle Smith made that process extremely hard. So that is an example today. We are living through an example where Alberta is taking this is an example of gross overreach by Ottawa. Why is Ottawa responsible for firearms legislations provincially?
Yeah, I agree.
So it's a great example. So, that's the Saskatchewan did it in Alberta. The rules, if anybody's thinking of becoming a firearms repossessor, you're not going to want to do it. It's going to be too complicated.
And I've seen this question a few times before. Marlon asks, it's one thing to seize the firearms, but what about bullets? Do you know anything about that? Like, can you just go and get bullets for a gun that might be illegal? Can you just go and buy those? Like,
you know what? Bullets right now are treated the same as a firearm. They have their own rules, and you need the paperwork. You need the card to get bullets. Yeah. The guy. In fact, I think that whoever's asking that question probably knows the answer. The government's already restricting the kind of ammunition that comes in. It is that if you can let the people keep their guns and take away the bullets, that's an example.
Yeah, that's right too. Yeah. And I'm just going to go back and so here's some more questions here. Again, Marlon asks, would anyone know offhand if there are any other countries whose governments are willing to recognize an independent Alberta, especially if Ottawa cracks down on our efforts? So this has actually come up a few times because we were talking about who would be our immediate trading partner. And of course, it sounds like the Americans would be totally fine dealing with our oil and any trade goods.
historically, when countries do this thing, somebody is quick to accept them, whether it's, and another great point. So, people say, can Alberta be independent? Absolutely. And people say it'll be landlocked. Who cares? Kuwait's landlocked, and so are other countries. And to your viewers, to people who might not know this, Canada would no longer be a G7 country without Alberta. So Canada drops to like G15, and Alberta on its own is a G30 country. On her own, Alberta is economically stronger than Israel, Ireland, Finland, lots of great, so no.
Depending on what you're actually talking in terms of GDP and everything, I've heard like anywhere from 4 to 7, and likewise, I've even heard number 3. So and I know for a fact that if Trudeau didn't screw up the whole LNG thing with Europe and Germany, I think that we would probably be able to have some people negotiate sending LNG over there.
Do you know who you're talking to regarding LNG, by the way? Do you know what I've done, right? I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't know that.
I was the vice president of a company called Paraday trying to advance the Goulburn project in Nova Scotia. So I sat in the room with people from Germany who came and bought 30 or 20 years worth of natural gas from Canada in 2013. It was a $35 billion contract. Wow. Trudeau made it so hard that we couldn't get the permits. We couldn't keep advancing. We couldn't, and we were burning through, we burned through $200 million of money and never got anywhere. It was so important to Germany that Germany kept renewing that contract, even though there were sunset clauses that kept coming up. Germany renewed it. And finally, it wasn't Germany that didn't renew it. It's Paraday, the Alberta company, that said, we're done. We can't do this anymore. We're bleeding cash. Less than 8 months ago, the Chancellor of Germany comes back to Canada, kind of trying to beg to get that contract with anybody because they want our gas. It's a $35 billion contract, and Trudeau told them he didn't have a business case. It's like he ain't trying to. And Trudeau said, you're in a dying industry. And I was in the room when he said that to us, and I felt like saying, I'm not in a dying industry. I'm in an industry that you're trying to kill. There's a big difference.
Absolutely.
A big difference.
Yeah. We've done webinars with talking about climate change and basically trying to make things so that we get rid of the oil and gas industry in Alberta, and everyone's going to end up driving electric cars, et cetera, and it's all
and show us the way. I mean, Seamus O'Regan was in Calgary apparently 2 weeks ago or last week, I think, and he posted pictures and talking about how he's going to come and dump billions of dollars and help us transition. And we keep hearing that word. And if I had him face to face, I'm like, Seamus, love the idea, but how about you go do that in a have-not province, right? If there's green jobs and they're so great, then go do the green jobs in PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And they can show us how it's done. In and then if they win, and if there are great green jobs, I'll jump on board. But why would you start in Alberta?
We still need to heat our homes in Canada, even if there's green jobs.
We make a beautiful resource that everybody wants. Oil and gas. Everybody's
You need that with. So many products. Bill says, I believe there's an international maritime law stating landlocked countries must have access to oceans or seas. Is there not? And again, I know Dr. Dennis Modry has talked about this in terms of UN, and as much as we may not agree with the UN, but basically there is law out there that says, if you're landlocked, you must have ability to do stuff through water or other transportation.
Sure, but again, and I think we're, I'll be blunt. I mean, I promote Danielle. Right now in this context, I support Danielle. One of the things Danielle Smith and the UCP did just in the last couple of weeks, and I wish they'd brag about it a little bit more, is they did come up with an agreement with Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and there is an energy corridor that's been agreed through to get resources to the Hudson's Bay. So And then everybody says Hudson's Bay is frozen year round. It's like, man, that's just another problem that engineers can solve, man.
Yeah,
the Russians have icebreakers that go all over the place. So
that's
we
right.
can, we'll figure it out. So
yeah.
No, we're putting, I think, I think a lot of Albertans in particular are waking up to the fact that an independent or maybe not an independent, but a step towards independence. If it's not an independent Alberta, we need to be stronger. I don't know too many Albertans who don't think we're getting a bum rap in Confederation.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you travel the country. I mean, I was recently working in Quebec, and I still have arguments with people in Quebec who think that they pay more to equalization than we do. So it's like, wow. But Quebecers are getting their news from somewhere else, and
that's
so
right. Yeah.
So Albertans who are and others who are listening today, yes, we need to be stronger towards that independence. We need to at least demand our fair share.
Yeah.
It's not going to come through major reform in the near future in terms. I mean, God, I think we're adding seats to out east and at the next election. So, so you got somebody like Danielle and Saskatchewan and Manitoba getting together to
stand up to the feds and
stand up to the feds. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And many of these sorts of questions. Can we really be self-sufficient? Will the U.S. be our only import country? We've talked about that. But this is one of the things that I want to talk about too, is I've talked to many people this is what Terry says. I've talked to many people. Separation still scares a lot of them. They need their hands held to discuss and understand it, which is why we're doing these webinars. So that you actually, if you listen to it and you share it and you have conversations, I think that's the thing that people have lost, how to have conversations about these sorts of
and it is a scary thing, right? Even when I ask people like, does that mean I don't have my Canadian flag anymore? It's like, in principle, it kind of does at some point. Yeah. And that makes people nervous. But then I can help them. I'm like, how did you feel about living in Ontario and the thought of moving to Alberta? Yeah. I didn't like it at first. Once you got here, you went to Stampede and you got along. My kids experience that all the time. You're wearing your logo for your hockey team and you're proud of it, and then you get traded and you go to another team. So that fear, would I be upset about of just calling myself an Albertan and no longer calling myself a Canadian?
Yeah,
I'll get over it.
Yeah, and you know what people do. So I mentioned that I came here from Winnipeg in '96. So if you actually think back what the climate was at that point in '96, from Winnipeg, we lost our Winnipeg Jets in '95. Right. So I moved here in '96. Really didn't have a hockey team back home to say who I was going to cheer for. So I immediately jumped on the Flames, right? Because it just made sense. And then I immediately forgot about the Bombers and immediately jumped onto the Stampeders. And of course, I know everyone in Alberta seems to be cheering for the Oilers, which go Oilers, go Oil. But yet, get what jersey I bought about 5 or 6 years ago. I bought a Winnipeg Jets jersey.
You and many others. I mean, God, that's a nice. There's something special about Winnipeg. The team, not the city. I won't give you the city.
But we always think of our roots, and we always think about being part of Canada. And so my point with that about wearing a Canadian hockey jersey is, even if we were had our own Alberta hockey team or whatever, and in Canada, you'd probably end up saying, well, if you grew up in Ottawa, you might be cheering for Canada or the Senators or whatever.
Let me put this out there for you and your viewers, right? So Canada in 1966 chose a new flag, and the flag has a maple leaf.
That's right.
Now there's about 30 different kinds of maples in Canada, but that maple leaf is the sugar maple, which is not native to the Western Prairies. There's no sugar maples anywhere. So then I have all these people that go around proudly wearing their maple leaf, and I'm like, it's a tree that only exists out east. If we were Albertans, we would have we'd have an ugly old black spruce or a scrawny pine.
That's right. So anybody that's been watching us for the last little while, you know what shirt I'm wearing. Marty has not seen my shirt. All he sees is just blue and stripes. So I'm going to stand up and show him my
There you go.
See? There you go. So if you had a shirt like this and you're proud to wear it, then by all means be proud.
I have a friend who's taken on to stocking more Alberta flags and telling people who keep stealing his Alberta flag from his pole. He's like, if you want a flag, just come knock on the door and I'll give you a flag. Stop stealing my flag.
Yeah, I know. And I usually drive around with my little Alberta flag on my van too, on the antenna. And really, up until then, I was driving around with the Canada flag, and then when the whole convoy thing went, I was flying the Canada flag upside down, and a lot of people were upset about that. And this way, driving around with the Alberta flag on it, I feel pretty good because it's exactly what I feel like.
I mean, realistically speaking, in my lifetime, the 30 or 40 years I have left, a stronger Alberta is probably the hopefully is what I see, and that'll be good enough for me. A separate Alberta is is long term, but it is fundamentally my wish. Unless something extraordinary happens in Ottawa in the next 10 years, but I just can't see that. I just can't see that.
And here's another comment, because I like it when Judy, she says, I'm 73, never thought I would want Alberta to leave. Those fighting police force or our own pensions or transplants, basically saying she never thought that she would be even considering able to leave because she grew up here. She loves it. And that's the thing, is that, when as people get older and they get more involved in politics and they realize, geez, we've been getting screwed for forever. People really do want some kind of change. And this seems to be a way that they can get the change. So that is one side of the spectrum. You're older, you're dealing with your pension and have seen what's happened over the last, say 50 years. And then the question comes up, how do we get young people involved in this? Because really, if they've only been out of university, or, they don't have enough life experience yet to say, you know what, we really need to get out of here, because they're just like, no, I like the Oilers, I'll stay here. I like
no, that's a good question.
But how
I can't even answer it pragmatically. I mean, I have 4 adult children that are becoming adults, and we're not honestly talking about this very often. But I will say this: I mean, for one of my kids, tax return was done this year. We do them. I do taxes for my sons, and he had to pay a nice little chunk of taxes, and that sure wakes up people quickly.
Oh, it does. Yeah, absolutely it does.
Yeah. No, you know what? That's going to be a takeaway. I'm going to, because I asked my wife. I know how my wife feels. I mean, my wife is on board with an independent Alberta. We're the same age. Would she prefer? Actually, what she'd like is for Quebec to go first, and then show us the way, and then that nervous of what does it look like. Yeah. But good point about the younger generation. Yeah.
Here's a question specifically, I think, that you could answer. Mona says, where do you stand on opening up the West Country to more campgrounds, quads, huge RVs, etc.? Now, of course, because that's one of the things that you do, is you end up going out and backpacking and hiking, and really we've not talked too much about that. But yeah, what's your talk?
My opinion on that one's not going to be popular, because Marty, in fact, I do like. Well, actually, I can give a popular opinion. Some areas, humans want to recreate, and Albertans are entitled to the land. So I get that. So I think there has to be some areas that have to be opened up. If it's the West Country or an area, I'm 100% in agreement with that. And in fact, I think Alberta's done a good job of opening up the right amount of land to the right groups. You got provincial parks, you got areas for quadding, areas for horses, areas for walking. So we've managed it well, but the Marty who's into self-propelled sports, I mean, generally speaking, I walk. And so it just has to be done responsibly. I'm going to say that most RVers that I meet these days, I don't consider them very responsible. I hope Mona is not in that group. I'm just reaching behind my mic, but I value, I love our environment. I love our nature. God, I love our nature. And I understand why people want to go in there. Absolutely. So Mona, if they open up, be that responsible RV person. Hopefully you are. Pack out your garbage. Don't burn green trees, and then we'll all get along just fine.
So since we're on this topic, I'm going to ask you a totally unplanned question. What is your take on they started charging Kananaskis for fees, much like they do for national parks, right? So what is your take on the fees that they charge, and where do you think that money is going?
I hate the idea, first of all. So I've actually ranted about this topic while hiking, and guys turn around because I'm often got my cameras on.
Oh yes, yeah.
You know, the idea of charging a fee is just it's another one of those counterintuitive things. You charge a fee, two things happen. That's what I always tell people. The moment you charge a fee, the government becomes liable, and the person who pays the fee expects a service in return. So in the case of Kananaskis, they said, oh, it's all to go towards education. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people leave garbage by the side of a campground, even though there's no garbage can there in Kananaskis, and they go, well, I paid $90, so they can come and get. So that happens. And then hand in hand with the liability, when it becomes liability, then governments have to put up fences around the waterfalls. Man, I've seen the national parks transformed. You know, you and I used to go. I could go to Jasper in 1990. And I could walk right up to the edge of Athabasca Falls and look down.
You're right.
But now it's paved there because it has to be wheelchair accessible. There's a fence because they got to protect the guy. And then you're charging a fee, but now the fee is actually can't even go towards an additional services because within 10 years, the infrastructure is so bad that it needs to be paid to be upgraded. And wow, now you're talking, I mean, I'll give you another example. I love to hike in the backcountry, and they keep charging fees, and they're transforming the backcountry into what I call a front country experience. And I don't go to the backcountry. When I go to the backcountry, I expect to walk across the creek and get my feet wet. But now they're putting bridges. And there's a super, super popular area. They put in a bridge. It took years to engineer it. So I have colleagues that did a shitty job of engineering this bridge. The bridge is so powerful that during the last flood, it created a dam instead of letting loose. And now the area is closed. Oh my God. No.
Wow.
So Danielle, scrap that fee. I know you're on the same page. Are we on the same page on this one, or what's your thoughts?
No, definitely. Like we pay enough in taxes, and yet here. So I think the reason they did that, and I could be slightly wrong, but I think I'm pretty much nailed on the head. When COVID hit and we actually couldn't leave our province, people needed something to do. So they immediately went to Banff, and they immediately went to Kananaskis. I was caught in 2 traffic jams leaving Calgary to go to Banff because I figured, well, you know, I might as well drive out to Banff. Literally the highway was jammed from Highway 22, which is the Cochrane turnoff on number 1, all the way to Banff. So you're talking, you know, an hour's drive. Or what should be an hour's drive was like 3 hours. And I ended up going down whatever that highway is into Kananaskis, 40. And again, it was the same thing. As soon as you turn into there, it was just back up. And I think with people not really, you know, they were looking for things to do. They ended up just wheeling off to the side and maybe threw garbage down, or maybe were taking pictures of bears or whatever it is. And I think the government said, you know what, if people are going to be doing this, we need to get a hold of the situation. We need to charge a fee. Maybe that'll distract people or detract people from going there. I mean, there's lots of different reasons for that.
No. You know, let's not beat the dead horse. But I found that I think it was an anomaly during COVID. A lot of extra people went out, that's for sure. Yeah. And they didn't have time to build extra infrastructure. So some of the existing infrastructure got abused. But I think that the government already had enough power. I mean, I know guys who are conservation officers. All they had to do was show up, and it's like, you left your garbage there, write $100 ticket. You don't need to charge somebody $80 to go put a garbage can. You could just, Well, you probably figured it out. When I say I like small government, I really mean it. Like but that's because I know I'm responsible, and that's one of the things. That's one of the I kind of hinted on it, and I hate the fact that some Canadians are becoming irresponsible and need to be governed. I really hate that.
Yeah.
You know. I'm not joking when I said to Mona or whoever, please do the right thing, and it keeps the government smaller, you know. And then we don't need to tattletale on each other, but we need to hold each other accountable, which is different. So when I see somebody doing something that is bad, I don't call the cops. I'll walk over and say, hey, bud, why are you doing this, man? Like, if you cut that tree and you burn it, you're ruining it for all of us. So, but deep down, I want small governments.
That's true.
Small governments, and then slap the ones that are really breaking the laws. Treat them badly. Like you really break the law. You know. Yeah.
Marlon's asking a lot of questions today. That's good. I like that. How would an independent Alberta deal with the treaties that basically the Indigenous nations have already?
You know what? I think they transfer over. That's how I would think of it, right? I mean, you'd have to, like, are the treaties with? Are they going to argue that the treaties are with the federal government? I guess. Yeah,
I think that would be a transitional way of dealing with it, right? And I know, I think Jeff Rath, the lawyer, spoke about some of this last week. And I know we've actually we've done one with when we talked about UNDRIP and dealing with some of the treaties as well. And it kind of again relays back to it depends on what the people of Alberta want to do. And so I'm a strong supporter of referendums based on anything that is a big controversial topic. I think we need to educate people on, and then we can have a referendum. We don't do that right now. We're basically saying, once every 4 years we go and we sign up. Yeah, I'm going to sign up for this person and I'm going to let them deal with everything while I go skiing. Right. And that's not really the way politics should be working. And so when we have these sorts of questions that come up about, so do we honor the treaties that are there? What do we do with our resources? All that sort of stuff. That should actually go out to a referendum. And of course, you can't just automatically do a referendum saying, what are we going to do about this? Because we have to have some discussion and have education on that particular topic.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we should have more referendums or means other than just every 4 years. But to that one back, I'm trying to think just very pragmatically. I mean, if I own land, I own these 40 acres, and you're the guy who owns and on the 40 acres, I rented you a spot where you can park your trailer. Let's say it's a bad example, but and I sell my land to the next guy. The agreement that I have with you is novated, and the new guy has that same agreement. So then you would have a concern. So your concern would be, is the new owner a good guy? Is he going to pay his debt? Is he going to clear the snow like he said he would? So then, so that's the challenge. Is the mechanics are easy, but the First Nations who signed the treaty might not like the new owner, because the new owner's pockets might not appear as deep as the last owner. But it could be better. I mean, God, maybe Alberta treats its First Nations better than Ottawa does. Let us separate, and we'll put clean water on your property.
That's right.
It's bad. Don't want to oversimplify it, folks. And I'm not being I'm adding a little bit of humor, but I'm not. It's a very serious topic.
It's definitely a serious topic. And again, these are the topics that we should be having at our dinner tables. And instead we're talking about the Kardashians, what they're doing. Actually, I don't even know anything about the Kardashians. I know my daughters follow pop culture and all that kind of stuff, but it's amazing how when you're not in that anymore, like I used to do that. I of course follow entertainment and music and all that. And now I'm really just politically motivated and politically, looking around and seeing if there's solutions out there. And I think that's really what the point again of these webinars and anything that Alberta Prosperity Project does is trying to get people to have those conversations again.
It's a great conversation, and I think we're probably getting close to wrapping it up. But deep down, I want a small government. Let's say I want a small government, but no matter what, I want a competent government. And right now, I don't like the fact that Canada's borrowing huge amounts of money and mismanaging its resources and things like that. We're just making things worse. So if I want an independent Alberta, it's not for these greedy reasons or whatever. Sure, it's to save money, but it's actually to do what I think should be done, which is we should have a small government that's responsible. We have a ton of resources. We should exploit those resources. There's no way we should be borrowing money. There's no way we should be going in debt, putting our kids in debt. We should be able to develop what we have nicely, fairly sustainably, long term, and give ourselves some nice perks out of it, such as healthcare and education and all those things. So we're not getting those. We are getting a raw deal from Confederation and from Ottawa. I mean, I want to sort of almost close on this. I guess. What time are we going till? Or
whenever we're done. It's already 57 minutes in, and if it's
it's something I keep coming back to. When Trudeau first got elected, I got nervous because I thought, oh man, that guy's going to be in power for 16, 20 years. He's got the right family name. He's fairly good looking. He's well spoken in the crowd, and he's got the pedigree and everything else. And he comes from Quebec, and he's going to get elected year after year for 20 years because all he needs is to win Ontario and Quebec, all he needs to secure himself is to get just a little. Throw a couple of bones the way of Alberta and Manitoba and Saskatchewan and BC. Get a few votes from them. Yeah,
I don't even think he needs to throw us any bones.
He doesn't even need to.
He's got enough.
Is he at the point where he doesn't even need to throw bones, that he's actually going to antagonize and take away our bones? Because that's what it feels like. Because I'm scared of that. If he was nice, he was nicer and he threw a few things our way, he could stay in power forever. So I don't know why he's doing what he's doing, which then brings us into this whole WF, UN, world order,
which we've talked about as well.
Which Marty's not a conspiracist, because he knows how hard it is just to get a simple project off the ground. So
and I know, even when I was dealing with it, kind of just to relay with that, even when I was dealing with the military stuff, of course, I was working with a company that was based out of Calgary, but we were getting money from Ottawa in order to do the funding for the project that I was dealing with. And a lot of people don't realize that there are certain credits that are given to companies if they set up in preferred locations or, taxable, et cetera, et cetera. So the company that I was dealing with originally was based out of Ottawa. And they said, you know what, if you want to get more credits and expand our reach, you have to move out to Alberta. So they ended up moving out to Alberta. And that's basically how they got their foothold here. And there's a lot of companies out there that are basically doing the same sort of thing.
Yep.
Right. And moving head offices. I remember back in whatever it was, around the same time, 96, 98, when CP Rail moved their head office from Montreal to Calgary as well. Right. So
well, that was kind of the deal with Rogers and Shaw. Right. So Shaw is basically an Alberta company. Rogers gets it. So they got to. I'm just looking at the comments. Somebody laughed at my somebody said, when I said Trudeau's well spoken. Let me correct that. I agree. When Trudeau is full of platitudes and the hums and the haws and whatnot. But what Trudeau knows to do, watch a show like The Diplomat on Netflix or whatever. Trudeau can work a crowd. So he's comfortable around dignitaries and celebrities and other people. And so in that crowd where he's got to fundraise, he's in his element. So that's kind of what I meant by that. So he's exhausting his political capital right now. I think he's becoming a liability to the party.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
God, some of the gaslighting coming out of him in the last couple of days has been absolutely hilarious.
Especially saying, talking about, vaccination and whether or not I never said that, or
I didn't force people. I did. Yeah.
Force people to do that. Heavens no. Yeah, exactly.
No.
And Myrna asks, how close are we to having a referendum? So answering from APP's point of view, essentially, we've had Dr. Modry on the show, and the idea is that we need a certain percentage of people and a certain number in Alberta to basically launch a citizens action and a readiness, if you want to call it that, and actually take it to the legislature. And in order to do that, we have to get so many signatures within 90 days and all that. So this is the part about that's scrolling right on the bottom of your page right now. Go to bit.ly/AB votes yes. And then you can register your intention to vote. And the idea behind that is that if we were saying, yeah, we have to get 600,000 signatures tomorrow or within 90 days, how would we go about doing that? Well, we have to have door knockers and all that. And I was actually corrected on that. It would go through Elections Alberta, so they would get the door knockers and do all that. Well, the problem is that how many people would they actually need to get out there and get 600,000 signatures within 90 days? If we had this long list of people and their addresses and phone numbers and all that, say 1 million names, when the time comes, we could actually contact them through Elections Alberta and get those signatures done within those 90 days. So we're being very proactive in order to do that.
Yeah, it could be accomplished. I mean, you know, we how many days? 90 days for 600,000?
Yeah. I know it sounds like it can, but let's just say what happens if Elections Alberta only throws 50 people at it? Right. So, and with that we have no control over. But doing this sort of thing, it definitely gives us the opportunity that But that would be a referendum sort of forced by the people or demanded by the people. But the government could the government not also initiate a referendum? Yes, they could. So, and again, from my understanding, is the UCP government cannot do that because it's not in their bylaws yet. Right. So, again, how long? So we vote in a UCP government in May, and then does it have to go through the whole?
Within a year or two, I'm sure they could.
You would think, but they would have to actually change their policies, right? And I know the NDP, they do not have anything like that. They will not do any sort of separatism or sovereignty or anything like that. And really, so we're just looking at kind of the independence types parties that would have something that would be able to do that, right? So things to ponder when the new election comes up in 34 days.
Did the writ drop today or
no? It drops I think May 1st, and it'll go until they're saying May 29th right now, Monday, May 29th.
Yeah, we have an interesting period up ahead of us. I mean, I've said to several people who keep asking me this, my focus seems to be all over the place on Twitter, for instance, but my focus right now is to get Danielle reelected and then we'll see everything else. I mean, there's no but what I'm curious about in the next couple of weeks is whether Trudeau really does anything that could tip the scale one way or the other.
That is very true. Especially like the comment about resources, or maybe there is going to be some sort of property rights thing about gun laws, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next little bit.
Yeah, I don't expect Trudeau to come visit Alberta. I don't even expect Jagmeet Singh to come visit Alberta. Probably the one who'll visit here the most will be Max Bernier. Max will find a way to come and show his face.
That's right. Well, you know what? We'll wrap up with that unless there's any last questions coming up here. But I see TS has a funny little joke, and that's always a fun thing to end on. What is the objective of a Trudeau-funded football game? Answer: to get the quarterback. Thanks, TS.
Yeah, thanks.
Always follow the money. Follow the money. There you go.
Yep.
So if that's it, do you want any last comments about anything that we didn't cover? Maybe.
No, this was a great chat. I mean, be honest, I was a little nervous beforehand, and one thing I do is I try not to rehearse. You know, it's okay when I know the topic, but I try not to rehearse. And this was really great chat.
You know, if there's 3 or 4 points that we can get through, I mean, you know, there's lots of things that we've talked about, even in terms of APP.
I mean, my closing comments are probably in line with what you guys are trying to do, which is don't be scared, folks. Like I do see folks scared about, say, a hardcore Alberta independence where we vote and you stop wearing your Canadian flag and we get a new anthem. That would be, you know, that's 100 years or 50 years down the road. But in the short term, let's just work on a prosperous Alberta, a sovereign Alberta that is respected by Confederation, and we get our fair deal, because we punch above our weight class. So that's not even it's not even fair. And we are very generous. Albertans are very generous. Like I said, most of the guys I know were extremely generous. We knew, you know, working, pay a little extra taxes. We don't care if it's going to PEI and New Brunswick to help out there. Fine. But when we get attacked, that's, you know, let's go back to being friendly, but we're not going to be pushovers. We can't be pushovers.
Yeah. And with that, here's one last comment here. Anne says, would the WEF overturn anything we try to do? Well, again, they only have the influence that they do because of either the people that they've put into government, or maybe the companies that they support. So as Albertans, maybe we just be a little more forthcoming and we say, you know what, if you're part of the WEF as a government controlled opposition, whatever you want to call it, or maybe your company is supported through the WEF, we don't support you. And maybe that's just a simple way of looking at it. Whether or not that it really ends up being a simple way of dealing with it, we have no idea. But you know, under the circumstances, I think most people in Alberta tend to agree the way that we're talking about. But there's always the people that will say, yeah, I agree with you, but I can't mention it at work because I'll be looked at funny, right? And I always say to them, well, then that's fine. You know what? Talk however you need to do. I would prefer if you opened up and actually said how you feel. But the big thing is vote the way your heart feels, and don't feel like you have to vote a way that their company is telling you to vote, right? Or a union is telling you to vote. Vote the way that you want to, because then you can vote on, as an example, May 29th, and then on June.
That's it.
May 30th, you go, geez, I don't know how that party got in there.
That's a great comment, but I'll be honest, I find it weird because I guess I've worked in such a private sector my whole life. I've never had an employer or a boss or anybody sort of steer me in a vote, you know.
Oh, is it? Yeah, there's there are, like, if you're, as an example, if you're a teacher or you work in healthcare, they actually have union meetings where they will tell you how to vote.
God.
Yeah.
So that would. I'm so stubborn. You tell me to do one thing, I'm probably going to do another. So it wouldn't work.
Exactly. Yeah. So with that, you know, I definitely want to say thank you, Marty, and it was great to have you on. And you know, hopefully we'll actually meet up sometime and shake hands, and because I always like to do that and try and get out. And I know with APP we do want to get out and do a lot more of these talks and conversations and meetings. And I know there's chapters out there right now that do have chapters meetings, and all you really need to do is just go on the Alberta Prosperity Project website and take a look and see what activities are going on, what meetings are going on. And you know, it'd be great to even have you come out and talk a little bit of
anytime
to that. So
if you haven't figured it out, I love chatting, love meeting people, love discussing ideas. I mean,
awesome.
That's what I love. Absolutely.
That is great. Excellent. Good. And of course, we're always looking for volunteers and people to be involved. And if you want to do that, just go on to the albertaprosperityproject.com and sign up for that. And again, don't forget your memberships. Oh yeah, look at that. And catch more of Kerry Lambert on the Chris and Kerry Show at thechrisandkerryshow.com. So these webinars we end up posting on there as well. And I'm pretty sure my compadre Chris and I will be doing a live show very, very soon, because there's a lot to talk about. There's always always stuff to talk about politically, as well as what's happening in court, what's happening around the world, and Chris, of course, has been out to the Netherlands. I just got back from Vegas. Probably not as politically, but it is an interesting conversation that we're going to have. So I advise you to please check back into that. And with that, I am going to wrap it up. And so thank you again. And
thanks for having me on there, Kerry. Absolutely.
Wish
cheers, everyone.
Yeah, there you go. I can be my Canada Dry. I don't have an Alberta Dry yet. Maybe they'll come out with something like that. And guess what? I'm still drinking that same Canada Dry. Well, you know what? That interview was done in April. And of course, now it's December 27th, after Christmas. Things have changed, but they've also stayed the same. There's a lot of things I wrote down, and I'll get to some of the questions. Again, thank you so much for staying on here. I know we had about 130, 140 people on, and now, of course, because it looked like we were going to wrap things up, people have dwindled away, and that's okay. Not a big deal. You can always catch us on a replay. Just go to the chriskerryshow.com. It'll be reposted again later tonight, and it's always on the Alberta Prosperity Project. You can go on Twitter and Rumble and take a look at those things too. But it was interesting that we did talk with Marty about property rights, gun rights, and where things have gone with that. And one of the things, again, it's interesting to take a look at it after the fact, is we talked about EV cars, and a lot has happened with the whole EV market, with even since April, especially with Guilbeault basically saying that, and Trudeau saying that we will no longer be able to have ICE or internal combustion engines in our vehicles after 2035. And that's going to come up a lot faster than people think, because I just saw that I'm a bit of a car guy, and they actually had the last Charger that had the big Hemi engine, 1,000 horsepower. The last one was made, and they're not making any more. None of that size engine, because it's too big. It's too big, and it's eating up all the gas and polluting the planet, I guess is what they're saying. We also did talk a little bit about the park fees, and again, things have changed even since April. Now we're talking about they've changed the park fees to, the name is actually the conservation pass, right? Everything's got to be done as a pass now. And national park, as I go into the Bow Valley quite often with my business, it's $10.50 a day if you're just an adult, and a pass is $72. Kansas, even if you wanted to go into there, it's $15 a day and then $90 for a park pass. But again, Lake Louise, because everybody likes going out and skating during the winter. That was actually one of our plans to go tomorrow, is to go skating, and we may still, because Lake Louise is open, although it's there's very few places in Calgary that are open. No Olympic Plaza is open, Bonus Park. But they have it now that if you want to go to Lake Louise, the chateau, it's parking. You have to pay for parking, and it's $21 a day just to go up there and park. And whether or not you walk out and you do spend 3 or 4 hours hiking, or if you just want to walk up and take a selfie picture there. So everything seems to be a money grab. And that's the thing that really gets to me the more we get into this, is that I just follow the money. And, even since that interview in April, we've had our election. We all know how that turned out. And going into the fall, we were looking at immigration. And here's just a couple of quick numbers just so that you know. So up until the previous year, I think we were capped at about 200,000 immigrants per year into Canada. Within the last year or two, that cap is now being at 400,000. And since September, we've now had another 400,000 come in. So if you wanted to do the math on that, I think in the last year and change, we've had about 1.4, 1.5 million new Canadians come in. And again, I have no problems with immigration if it's handled correctly. But if they're just bringing in immigrants just because they want to, that leads into a housing crisis, that leads into homelessness. When I was running in the provincial election, that came up quite a bit. I was running in Chestermere and Strathmore, and it seemed that they were busing people, homeless people from downtown Calgary out to the outskirts. They were going out to Strathmore and beyond. They were going to Red Deer, basically just get rid of the problem that's happening in the cities. And again, that probably had a lot to do with it in terms of housing, etc. So things that we need to be able to talk a little bit more openly. And of course, the last thing that was really noticeable was when we were talking about where is the money going. And now we've got yet another war going on. So the federal government is now taking the money and giving it to the Ukraine, as well as sending it off to the conflict in Israel. And I'm not even going to get into that because that is above my pay grade. So, but I did want to at least acknowledge those changes that had happened in even within this year. And of course, if you were following along, maybe you found out a little bit more. I'm going to go back just a couple of comments. And Denise says, we love common sense citizens in Alberta. Thank you for saying that. Here was the one I did pop up. Selfish, we fight for all of Canada as my veteran family have. You have a great premier. Basically, I'll take that from Jesse saying that it's selfish to think about separating from Canada. We should be united, etc., etc. Maybe Jesse is new here and she has not heard all the stories about how Alberta and even the West has been screwed since 1905. Go back and take a look at all these, because there is so much in that topic that maybe she will change her mind if she actually was to read all that. But I you know, from an outsider's point of view, and if you came in and you just said, oh, you know what, you guys are having it all good, then I think you should just stay in Canada. You don't know the whole story, right? So, and this is one that I did want to bring up here too, because, and it's a long one. Jizaz, I like Rod's beginning. When is everyone going to clue in that Confederation never happened? The Queen Mother wanted to wash her hands of the Dominion Canada by having them form a confederation. No provinces could agree with what that would look like, so it was decided they would dissolve their Dominion, and they did. And every province was given sovereign statehood into themselves. This was decreed by the Queen. This was 1930. For Christ's sake, look it up. The Laurentian elites at the time control, blah, 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 blah. I hear that all the time, but you have to convince 40 million, maybe even 41.5 million Canadians that actually happened and what we can do with it. And here's a perfect example. Do we all know what this is? It's a $20 bill, Canadian $20 bill. What's it worth? $20? It's actually worth nothing. The only reason it's worth anything is because we as a society agree that this is worth $20, and you can decide whether or not it's worth $20 of your time, $20 of a product, $20 of whatever. We've all agreed on this. If you can convince people that this is not the way it should be, convince 40 some odd million Canadians, then I think you might have a pretty good idea about being able to convince them of this sort of thing too. So that's why I wanted to do that. What do we do with the mayors like the ones in Edmonton and Calgary? And there is a follow-up to this. There has to be a different way of voting. And I agree. So how do those two team together? I was, again, in the provincial election, they were paper ballots, and they were actual paper ballots. I actually went to my electoral office and I saw the ballots. And they were dumped out onto a table and counted, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot to that, but let me just kind of paraphrase that that's what they end up doing. They do enter the numbers electronically so that those numbers get pulled back to the electoral, the office, so that they know that, you know, coming from this particular area, there was 1,000 votes, and this is how those 1,000 votes came up. But otherwise, everything is traceable to a paper ballot in a box. That box gets wrapped up, sealed, put into a truck, driven to Edmonton. It takes a few days for them to unwrap, take a look, verify the numbers, blah, blah, blah. The point with that is it's paper, And it's not just on a computer. And the issue that we've got right now with the federal and the municipal elections is they're all digital. We all take a card and we go in and we check off whatever we want to do. It goes into a machine, gets eaten up, and they spit out a number. And we have no real control of whether that number is real. So I think that we need to be able to say, you know what, screw this. We need all elections to be paper. I don't care if it's federal. I don't care if it's municipal. And yeah, if we have to hire more people to do that, hell, they're hiring people no matter what. We might as well give people some jobs during the elections. So there you go. So that was one thing I want to do. And then, of course, we talked to Alberta should control our own immigration limits. I agree. Provinces should be able to have certain jurisdictions. Maybe that should have been in one. As far as I know, it is a federal mandate. I don't think provinces do that. But maybe that's one of the things that we say when we go to the time of a referendum. We say, you know what, we're going to decide on maybe policing, our own taxing, that, and maybe one of those points that we can negotiate on would be our own immigration. So that's kind of where I'll leave you guys with. And there you go. Our government, I like it when people, our government is fuck all. We got to stop the WF. I totally agree, Stone. Totally agree. So with that, thanks again for watching. And I'm going to actually tell you that you should probably go over and watch the Shadow Davis podcast. I'm just going to put that into the notes here as well. That's where Chris is. Chris is over talking in the Shadow Davis. They've got Jason Levine. They've got Odessa. A lot of independent journalists. So finish watching this, because this is no longer entertaining. Go ahead, watch that. And I'm going to tell you one more quick thing. I'm hoping everybody has an amazing 2024. Oh, I was going to bring up my little tutor. 2024. Doot, doot, doot. Sadly, and this is kind of the official announcement, but we're going to do something else. Sadly, the Chris and Kerry event that was going to happen in Red Deer has to be canceled for New Year's Eve. And that was a tough decision for us to do. And there's a lot to that, but essentially it was probably not the best time to be trying to do something like that actually costs a little bit of money. We've got tickets that we're trying to sell for Tucker Carlson. We've got other events that are going on. I know there's other events that are going to be taking place in January. We just came back from a really expensive, expensive for some people, I guess, AGM, and money is tight everywhere. And so, you know what? This may be the year of just stay at home and have a happy new year. And you guys are all amazing. Thank you so much for watching. Love you. And with that, I'm going to wish you guys again, happy new year and all the best in 2024. And we will see you next year. Good night, everybody.